Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees and here are today's top stories. Over 40 people have died and dozens are missing in Western Germany following catastrophic floods. Four people have been arrested over online racial abuse aimed at England football players after the Euro final. And investigators raid 2 homes over the leaked CCTV footage that led to Matt Hancock's downfall as Health Secretary. Two days of severe storms caused heavy floods in Western Germany. Over 40 people died and dozens are missing. Flooding also hit Belgium and the Netherlands. NTD's Joan Robson has this report.
Over 40 people have died and dozens are missing in heavy flooding in Western Germany. Storms across parts of Western Europe in recent days caused rivers and reservoirs to burst their banks, resulting in flash floods.
There is mud everywhere in the houses. The bridge there collapsed. Water over. Further down, even houses have floated away.
18 people died in the worst-hit region of Ahrweiler. 15 others were killed in Euskirchen. Some residents compared the damage to wartime bombing as an emergency was declared in the region.
Electricity is probably not available in the whole region, and what you see here now is worse than after a bombing raid, and this is guaranteed to take 10 years. The people are all broke, the businesses have...
Rescue operations were hampered as phone and internet connections went down southwest of Cologne. Police in the western city of Koblenz say about 50 people were trapped on the roofs of their houses awaiting rescue.
It is not a war, it is just nature hitting back, and we should finally start listening to it.
6 houses collapsed during the night and many people were reported missing. Floods also hit neighbouring Belgium, where 6 people were reported dead, as well as the Netherlands. More rain is forecast. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
The United Nations warns new laws regulating online content in the UK and other countries may end up restricting freedom of speech. UN officials say the laws must avoid overly broad definitions and over-reliance on algorithms. NTD's Eddie Aiken brings us the details.
Dozens of new laws on social media have been adopted worldwide in the last 2 years. But according to Peggy Hicks, a senior human rights official at the United Nations, many of these laws are problematic and may end up damaging human rights.
Virtually every country that has adopted laws related to online content has jeopardized human rights in doing so. This happens both because governments respond to public pressure by rushing in with simple solutions for complex problems, and also because some governments see this legislation as a way to limit speech they dislike and even to silence civil society or other critics.
Online freedom of speech is not just restricted in authoritarian countries. As Ms. Hicks points out, it is also facing threats in Western democratic countries, including the UK.
The United Kingdom in May tabled its draft online safety bill, which has a worryingly overbroad standard that makes the removal of significant amounts of protected speech, i.e. speech that under international law should in fact be permitted, almost inevitable.
There are calls for the online safety bill to be passed quickly after Black England footballers suffered racist online abuse following Sunday's Euros final. On Wednesday, the Prime Minister pledged to strengthen measures against online abuse.
I repeat that I utterly condemn and abhor the racist outpourings that we saw on Sunday night. And so what we're doing is today taking practical steps to ensure that the football banning order regime is changed so that if you are guilty, Mr. Speaker, of racist abuse online of footballers, then you will not be going to the match. No ifs, no buts, no exemptions and no excuses.
But Ms. Hicks warned against a knee-jerk reaction, especially suggestions that social media companies should use algorithms to block racist speech.
I think it's really important to note that some studies have shown that, in fact, when we used automated moderation tools like that, they end up censoring more heavily the exact people we want to protect. So common hate speech detectors have been found to be 1.5 times more likely to flag content by Black people as inappropriate than content posted by white people.
UN officials also expressed concerns over the EU's Digital Services Act, which requires tech giants to do more to tackle illegal content such as hate speech. They said will impose overbroad liability on social media companies for user-generated content, and there will be limited judicial oversight. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
4 people have been arrested over online racial abuse aimed at members of the England's football team after Sunday's Euro 2020 final. Police say a specialist team is looking into offensive comments made on social media sites towards 3 black players, Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford and Bukayo Saka. All 3 missed penalties in the penalty shootout defeat against Italy at Wembley Stadium. The abuse has been widely condemned, and the government has promised action against social media companies if they do not remove offensive material more quickly. Police said there were 897 football-related incidents and more than 264 arrests in the 24 hours around the final, a big increase on tournaments in recent years. Chancellor Rishi Sunak says we are bouncing back as the UK sees the biggest leap in the number of workers on payrolls since the start of the pandemic. Job vacancies are also soaring. NTD's Neil Woodrow spoke to an expert to get the latest on this.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak cheered a recovering economy and jobs market, saying the number of employees on payrolls is at its highest level since last April, and the number of people on furlough halved in the 3 months to May. Official figures showed a record increase of over 350,000 in payrolled workers between May and June, the 7th monthly rise in a row. Firms hired at a blistering pace after indoor hospitality reopened and ahead of the final lifting of restrictions on July the 19th. I spoke with Professor Len Shackleton to get his comments on the latest data.
What's your view on the figures? First of all, what's your analysis of the figures?
Well, I think they are very positive. They show that the UK labour market has not lost its flexibility during the COVID pandemic. New jobs are being created. We've got more vacancies than we've had for a very long time.
But he says there are some areas that will struggle to recover so well.
The problem is, of course, that there are certain sections of it which are not going to recover. We've still got people on furlough. I think one of the things about what Rishi Sunak is saying at the moment, he's being upbeat because he doesn't, he has to resist this pressure to extend furlough beyond the end of September. There's a lot of pressure still for him to say, oh, let's roll it out and so forth. And I think that would be a mistake.
Shackleton says the parts of the country doing best at the moment in terms of new jobs are the North West, North East and Northern Ireland, usually poor performers in the labour market.
You see, what's happening is that there's a lot of jobs being created in things like delivery, right? Transport, lorry driving, warehousing, logistics of all kinds. And often those are outside the main sort of centres of population.
Shackleton says jobs in hotels and restaurants are available, as they are usually done by Europeans.
On one estimate, 700,000 people have left the UK to go back to to European Union countries. This is a lot of young people who typically, staff the sandwich bars and the coffee shops and so on in London and other big cities. So there are jobs available there as well. In fact, looking down the list of available jobs, it seems, it's not biased towards particularly low skill or particularly high skill. There's a good mix of new vacancies.
The Chancellor says he looks forward to seeing more people back at work and the economy continuing to rebound. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
Investigators say they seized computer equipment after raiding homes over the leaking of CCTV footage that led to Matt Hancock's resignation as Health Secretary.
Morning, Mr. Hancock.
The Information Commissioner's Office says 2 raids were carried out in the south of England as it investigates an alleged data breach. Hancock had to resign from the cabinet after a newspaper published footage of him kissing an aide in breach of lockdown rules. The company that provides CCTV services at the Department of Health says the images were allegedly taken without consent. The leak prompted security concerns in Whitehall, and new Health Secretary Sajid Javid says the camera has been switched off. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith says the government is in an unholy mess over its approach to business deals involving China, as it fails to block the sale of a microchip manufacturer in Wales to a Chinese-backed company. NTD's Al Rhodes brings us more on this.
During an urgent question at the Commons on Thursday, MPs ask why the government hasn't intervened in the sale of a semiconductor company in Wales to a Chinese-owned firm. Sir Geoffrey Clinton-Brown says it is completely inconsistent if the government allows the takeover of Newport wafer fab after banning Huawei's equipment over national security fears.
The Prime Minister also stated that we need to be more self-reliant. And he said that he was told that it costs £9 billion to build a semiconductor factory. Why would we allow such a sophisticated national infrastructure to be sold?
Newport Wafer Fab is the UK's largest semiconductor manufacturer and employs 450 people. Shadow Business Minister Chi Onwurah says the government should use powers in the National Security and Investment Act to urgently scrutinise this takeover.
This is a critical test of whether the government is willing to use these new powers or not, which goes to the heart of what kind of industrial strategy we have and what kind of country we want to be.
Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith says the government is in an unholy mess over its approach to business deals involving China.
China is the biggest exporter in the world and is busy buying up semiconductor technology everywhere it can find it. They have identified semiconductor technology as one of the key areas that they need to dominate globally. My simple case is, are we now in the position of a kind of project kowtow where we simply say, we just have to do business with the Chinese no matter what?
Business Minister Amanda Soloway says the government has looked closely at this transaction and doesn't consider it appropriate to intervene. The Prime Minister has asked National Security Advisor Sir Stephen Lovegrove to review the takeover. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
Members of Parliament debate a motion calling for a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics. It was led by MP Tim Lawton, who was sanctioned by China for speaking out about its human rights abuses. He says the sanctions have only made him speak louder. Here's NTD's Jen Well with the story.
MPs debated a motion on Thursday that calls for a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. MP Tim Lawton, who led the debate, said things have got worse since Beijing hosted the Games in 2008.
It was all a sham, and we all know how human rights in China have gone from bad to worse.
A diplomatic boycott means the athletes would be free to take part, but delegates from the UK, including government officials and royalty, wouldn't attend. Former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith backed the motion.
Our government must recognise now that it is no longer dealing with a decent organisation that would uphold freedoms. It is dealing with a dictatorial, militaristic, intolerant, oppressive regime who every time we give them these public demonstrations as the Olympics, we do ourselves and worse, the Uyghurs, the Tibetans and all those oppressed peoples, a disfavour. Let us stand up for freedom, democracy and human rights and not back these games.
MPs Sir Ian, Tim Lawton and Nusrat Ghani were among those sanctioned by China for speaking out about the regime's human rights violations.
Mr Deputy Speaker, as you know, I'm one of the MPs sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party, not for committing gross human rights abuses or for being a terrorist or a warlord, unless my colleagues have something they wish to share about themselves, if they've been sanctioned too, but for rising to speak up against genocide. And if my government thinks that it has any way in persuading the CCP to conduct itself any differently, to our values and our norms, then I'm afraid that it has lost the plot completely.
It's an issue that has cross-party backing.
To send a clear message to the Chinese Communist Party that oppression and discrimination can never be tolerated. Today, Labour is calling for a political and diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Games, as set out in a letter from my honourable friends, the Shadow Foreign Secretary and Shadow Culture Secretary, to their opposite numbers on the 7th of July.
The Minister Nigel Adams said a decision hasn't yet been made whether UK ministers will travel to the Beijing Olympics. He said the UK's approach to China remains clear-eyed and rooted in our values. The motion passed unopposed. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Still to come, the EU has set out plans to end the sale of petrol and diesel cars within 20 years, including phasing out hybrids. There's that and more when we return. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.